Hey everyone, this is part three of the English 4 AP Allusions that I wanted to go over, and keep in mind that these allusions are primarily biblical, mythological, and they refer to people or objects or places in some circumstances. I have another presentation on allusions that deals primarily with phrases like living in an ivory tower or don't cast pearls before swine, and we'll go over that at a later time. But we're going to finish this one out. And so, first on the list is Sisyphus. Now, Sisyphus comes from Greek mythology, and before I talk about Sisyphus, I want to make it clear that in Greek myths, you often see the gods acting in a way that is either wrathful or sometimes capricious, as if the gods themselves don't have to adhere to human morality. But, well, they don't, first and foremost. But more to the fact, the ancient Greek gods, most of the time, were nature gods. Zeus was a sky god, and he ruled the storms. Poseidon ruled the sea. And these gods, as such, had the same behaviors as nature does. It does what it wants, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And so, a lot of times, these stories were taken as lessons to sort of warn man to know his place. That as much as you want to strive and fight against nature, you're most likely not going to succeed. In fact, you can look at the Odyssey as a good example that Odysseus, his own arrogance got him in a lot of trouble. And so, despite being very, very smart, you could say, well, the Odyssey is about human intelligence defeating the wills of nature. And I don't think that's quite it. He didn't defeat anything. He survived. He barely survived in some cases, and he was lost for 10 years on top of fighting the Trojan War for another 10. So that story, serves as an example, a much longer example, but an example of man, needing to know his place, where he fits in, that there is something greater than man. And you could say that that's, the forces of nature, that's the planet, it's the universe, whatever it may be. The Greeks, the ultimate sin a person could commit in ancient Greece was called hubris, and hubris was excessive pride. Anytime you thought you were better than anyone or anything, you have stories where the gods would punish that. So man thinking he's better than the gods, man thinking that he's better than someone else, and it all came back to hubris, to where even if somebody were to commit murder, they would say that that's hubris. That is you thinking that you have the authority to take someone's life, or that you think your life is better than theirs somehow. Jealousy, I mean, all these things come back to arrogance and excessive self-pride. And so excessive self-pride was punished in I say punished in ancient Greece. Not so much that the courts would punish you, but you would end up finding yourself in a whole lot of trouble over time, just because it wasn't a culture or a society that they just didn't have time for it. To be perfectly honest, like they had stuff they had to do. They don't have time to deal with someone's overinflated ego. So anyway, on to this. Sisyphus. Sisyphus cheated death by telling his wife to forego the usual burial rites. In ancient Greece, the way that you were buried, you're basically put on a funeral pyre, and they would put two coins over your eyes, and those were coins that you gave to the boatman. The boatman, of course, being Charon, Charon. That's a good one to remember. Charon, the boatman, and you gave those coins to Charon, and Charon would take you to the underworld, Hades. So if you ever hear a reference to the boatman, that's what it is. But he told her to forego that. And so in Greek tradition, if somebody doesn't bury you the proper way, it would give you permission to leave the underworld so you could punish that person. Well, that's how Sisyphus got out of it. So he told his wife, don't bury me the proper way. And so he was allowed, he gets to the underworld, and he says, I have to go punish my wife because she didn't bury me the right way. So they let him go. He didn't have any intention of punishing her, but he gets out of the underworld, and he thinks he gets off scot-free. And then, I can't remember if it's untimely or if he just dies of old age. But when he dies the second time, Zeus was like, we're not doing that. So he condemned him to push a massive boulder up a hill, only for the boulder to fall each time he reaches the top. And you could say, like, well, he could have just not pushed the boulder. And my answer is going to be, well, because mythology. You can't apply logic or reasoning to these myths because they are at their core meant to teach a lesson, and they're sort of fantastic and odd. I mean, for someone to say, he could have just not pushed the boulder, they're ignoring the fact that this guy literally escapes an underworld that doesn't exist to come back to life to cheat a thunder and lightning god. So keep that in mind. But Sisyphus and his task symbolizes the never-ending struggle to complete one's task, only to be thwarted by still more hurdles. You could say that being an AP student, heck, I could say being an AP teacher, is a Sisyphean task in that you complete your stuff, but there's always more work to do. Next up, Sodom and Gomorrah. We mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah earlier with Lot's wife, and these were two major cities in the book of Genesis. They were destroyed by heaven with fire and brimstone. Again, that's an allusion. That's a reference. Fire and brimstone that was done to burn Sodom and Gomorrah, and those cities are symbols for debauchery and wickedness. If you make that reference of like, you probably only hear an old lady say it, but it's just like, you hear about a party and they say, man, that party was completely just, they had gone Sodom and Gomorrah. Like that's what it was. It was just crazy, and all sorts of debauchery and wickedness were going on. Like I said, you probably only hear some old lady or old man say something like that. All right, Styx and Lethe, and it's not Leth, it is Lethe. These are the two of the five rivers of the underworld. Styx is the last threshold that you cross. This is, again, taken by Charon, mentioned him earlier, the boatman, before entering Hades. Lethe is the river where your memories are washed away. So you go into the river of Lethe, and your memories of your past life are washed away, and you basically wander the underworld as a ghost, and you don't know who you were. And that's why in Greek culture, it was really, really important that you did things to be remembered by, and good things to be remembered by, because it was believed that anytime someone spoke your name in the world of the living, you got your memories back of that event. And so if you were in the underworld and you had died and you left behind people that loved you and people who thought great of you, they would continue telling your story. And the more they did that, the better life you would have in the underworld. Now, there's three things to say that I think are worth remembering. One, Lethe is the root word of the word lethal. So something is lethal and it kills you, yes, that goes all the way back to the Greek word Lethe, the river of the underworld. So that is the root of lethal. Remember that. Next thing is, oh man, I just forgot. How funny is that? That Lethe is a symbol of forgetfulness. First thing, it is the word for lethal. The second thing is that, wow, this is hilarious. I am so sorry. The three deaths. There we go. Back on track. So, there's this philosophical idea that a person dies three deaths. The first death is the physical death of the body. The second death is when you are buried or cremated and no one will see your body again. And then the third death is the last time someone says your name. And it's interesting to think about that there will come a time where someone's name is spoken for the last time. And so I think that's really it's a really neat little philosophical idea. And if we were to believe that people like Odysseus may have been real, how great would their life in the underworld be? Because we're still telling his story. Now, the third thing has to do with Odysseus. And there is one of my favorite lines in any story. And in the Odyssey, you probably remember it, when Odysseus goes down to the underworld and he sees Achilles. And Odysseus is thinking about giving up. Just said, I can just stay down here and I don't have to keep fighting to stay alive. And Achilles tells him, it is better to be a slave among the living than king of the dead. Because Achilles was treated like a king down there. And he just wanted to be alive so badly, but he couldn't. And so he tells him, keep fighting. Even when it's bad, it is better to be a slave among the living than the king among the dead. And so I don't know why that line is so profound, but if you remember the movie The Martian, those who watched it for the school-wide summer reading that year, The Martian's just a retelling of the Odyssey. And that's what he has to do. He has to keep fighting, keep fighting to survive, even though the odds are stacked against him. Next up, we have Tantalus. Tantalus was the founder, to bring it back to Odysseus and Achilles. Tantalus was the founder of the doomed house of Atreus, to which Agamemnon belongs. Agamemnon was the king of the Greeks that waged war against Troy in the Iliad. The Iliad, of course, is the epic that happens before the Odyssey. That's how Odysseus becomes the renowned hero in the before the Odyssey starts. He builds the Trojan horse, but Agamemnon was the king of the Greeks. And even though Achilles was his soldier and Achilles kind of had to fight for him, they hated each other. Of course, the doomed house of Atreus, Agamemnon ends up getting murdered by his own wife in his sleep. So that's, I believe, that the end of the line of the house of Atreus ends with Orestes. Orestes is the last to die. But Agamemnon was cursed, and his daughter Electra, basically Agamemnon's killed by his wife, and then Electra, his daughter, kills his wife, her mother, kills her mother, and then I believe Electra ends up dying, committing suicide after falling in love with her brother. So, yeah, the Greeks were, I don't know, there's way too many stories that have incest. It's uncomfortable. But Tantalus, as such, as he was doomed, he was punished by Zeus to suffer eternal hunger. So his name is the root of the word tantalize. I'm going to make the screen smaller to see how much time I have. Okay, got about 2.5 minutes on this thing. So I'm going to make this last one relatively quick. All right, Utopia. This is a 1516 book by Thomas More, where he described an island named, that should say named, not name, an island named Utopia, where people lived in a perfect world based on humanist ideals. The irony is utopia means nowhere. Some people believe that the reason he called it that is because he fully understood that a perfect world was not possible. So you'll hear people talk about a utopia, a perfect society, but there's also an ironic element to it, that if you call something utopia, people may use it with the intent that it be the perfect society, but we all know that, I mean, any utopia is doomed to fail just because human choice. When you say a world is perfect, you kind of have to ask, well, perfect for whom? But anyway, so those are today's allusions, and I will stop there. Hope you're doing well.